Welcome to Essex Wildlife Trust Members' Day celebration event. This session will be recorded. And now introducing your host, Dr. Andrew Impey. Andrew, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our annual Members' Day meeting, which will incorporate our AGM. We're doing another virtual event this year. We did the first one last year, and it seemed to work pretty well. That was obviously forced upon us by COVID. And this year, when we were doing the early planning, we kind of thought we don't know where we're going to be come end of the year. So we decided we would do another virtual event this year. So I hope you enjoy it. Obviously, from my point of view, I have different concerns doing a virtual event. In my head, I'll let you into a secret. I'm worrying about whether we're going to have that power cut that comes out of nowhere, whether my dogs are going to start howling like they do when they argue over the sofa, whether the Amazon man is going to be banging on the door again, wanting to deliver his parcel, or whether actually I'm going to do what I did yesterday, which was kick over a pint glass of Ribena on my beige carpet. So I'm worrying about all of these things, but you don't have to worry. You can just sit back and relax and enjoy the program that we're going to talk about today. So I'm not going to talk too much about the pandemic in this first hour, because we've probably, all had enough of talking about that. I know we're all very much fatigued about that, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, it's been a really, really challenging year for the Trust. And I'm really proud of what we've achieved, the staff, the volunteers, and everyone associated with the Trust in delivering a fantastic year for wildlife. So this morning is really about a celebration of what we've achieved, a celebration for you as members, because we can't do what we do without you. And I know I talk about that a lot, and maybe that sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it's so true. We cannot achieve what we do without you as members. And therefore, it's really impossible that we make it possible for you today to understand what we do as a trust, understand what you are supporting, the work that we do and how important it is. So sit back and get engaged with what we're doing, because I think it's really exciting. So the theme of this year and the annual Members' Day is about back to nature. So we know that the last 18 months has been so challenging for us. We've all been in lockdown. We've all been desperate to engage with wildlife. I'm a wildlife geek myself, have been since I was a small boy. And yet even myself, I have been engaged with nature more than ever before. I've been looking at bees. I've been looking at butterflies in my back garden. I've been taking pictures of spiders to try and get the best shot. I've been putting cameras up to look at my bird bath. I've been doing all sorts of things. And we've all been really engaging with wildlife during that lockdown period. We've all been desperate to get out and engage with nature. And we've seen that right across, not just the county or even the country, but right across the globe. People are really excited about nature. And it's that importance of nature that's really starting to drip through, I think. Even with the government, we know we've got a very anticipated environment bill at the minute, which has just come back to the House of Commons from the House of Lords. That's really focusing the government's attention. And there's a lot of pressure now to really do something. It won't have either escaped your attention that we have the big climate conference, COP26, which is coming up in Glasgow in a couple of weeks' time, where we hope that countries from all over the world are going to be renewing and strengthening their commitments to the Paris Agreement. So now, because of lockdown and because of COVID, and it's a kind of warped feeling, really, all of the negativity associated with COVID, which we all know about, but in a strange kind of way, it's offered us as conservationists and as people that care about wildlife, it's offered us a really good opportunity, because we now have an engaged audience. We have families, we have communities, we have decision makers, we have commercial entities, which are really, really engaged with the topic now. And what we have to do now is harness that and grasp it and build upon that. But as I said, without you, we cannot achieve what we're trying to do, to create that kind of environment where people are so connected with nature. So we've got a packed program this morning, and we're going to be showing you all of the things that we do. And I'm not going to be talking too much. It's not for the chief executive to dominate, because I have an incredible staff that support me and support you as members. So they're going to be telling you about all of the wonderful work that they've been doing. But there's just a couple of highlights that I want to draw your attention to. So let's just remind you of the bigger picture. So the Trust's vision, as I hope you well know, is a county rich in wildlife with people connected to nature. And really, in my mind, you can kind of distill that further into two simple words: the fact that we need a wilder Essex. Just this week, we've heard from the Natural History Museum their report about the fact, unfortunately, that we live in one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. I mean, we hear on the news about maybe famine in Africa. We hear about social unrest, maybe in parts of the Middle East. We hear about all sorts of disasters across the world. And we like to think actually we're lucky and we're fortunate, and we think we're better than other countries. But when it comes to natural history, we are one of the most nature depleted countries. And I just stress that not to depress you, but just to put it into context. In Essex, we obviously live in a county which is very rapidly developing. We have big infrastructure projects, be that nuclear power stations, God forbid, or maybe port expansions, big road expansions. And we all know that we have big housing targets. So there's a lot of pressure in Essex. So that's the scale of the challenge that we face. But everyone needs to play their part, however big or small. It's not just down to Essex Wildlife Trust. We can do lots. We can push, we can role model, we can articulate the benefits, the solutions, but every single person in Essex needs to play their part. And a wilder Essex is really about making space for nature. It's about preventing those declines, not just of the rare species, but also of the abundant species. It's about restoring habitats. It's about connecting nature and habitats so that we have these networks where wildlife can freely move between those habitats. It's where people are connected to nature, and it's where that natural capital, the stuff that's out of our window that we all know about, it's where that is valuable, and it's where it's embedded within decision making. And this is also associated with our big targets, which are national targets of 30 by 30, which is 30% of our land and sea protected and connected for nature by 2030. And also 1 in 4 people stepping up and taking action for wildlife by 2030. So there's some big targets there. So how do we make wilder Essex a reality? Part of the focus for today is that relationship between people and wildlife and how we lead wilder lives. As a trust, we believe that the only form of education that is fit for a sustainable future is based on a deep relationship with the natural world. And I love this picture. I'm sure so many of us can relate to this picture. It makes me smile and it makes me absolutely sing inside when I see this, because it reminds me of my childhood. And for me personally, I think this is what every child in perpetuity in Essex should be appreciating. So we're delighted to say that earlier this week, we opened our first nature nursery, which is based at Abbots Hall Farm. This has been 2 years in the making, and it's the first of its kind. It's Ofsted registered. It's providing high quality but affordable education for children of the ages of 2 to 5 years. And it's based on the principle of learning by nature. And if you were to live in somewhere like Scandinavia, this wouldn't be a big thing. This is just a normal thing that kids of a young age engage with nature. And it's so important. It's an additional program to our Forest School program. And it's an opportunity for everyone to engage with wildlife. So engaging with wildlife and nature at every age and at every stage in their life. Now we have a new nature nursery manager, Mel Newton, and she has created a great team, a really amazing team of real good practitioners, amazing skills, and they will change the face of preschool education, I have no doubt. It allows the children to explore nature and really learn about wildlife as they go through those formative years. And the children are actually directly involved in maintaining the site. And as I'm sure you can see here with the amazing yurt that we have, which is like basically an indoor classroom. And if you were to be lucky enough to poke your head inside that yurt, my God, you would wish you were a 2 to 5 year old, because it looks like heaven in there. It's so cozy. And they're learning all the time, and they're out on site learning. So they're creating new areas of wildlife. They might be creating log piles or hedgehog homes. They might be doing tree planting. They're doing woodcrafts, they're doing vegetable planting, they're harvesting their produce, they're cooking their meals together, they're even doing some composting, and they're learning about wildlife. And we know that children formulate their life values between the ages of 1 and 7. There's a lot of research to support that. That's not just an EWT view. There's a lot of research that what you learn when you're at a very young age, you take with you for your entire life. And that's why it's so important. If we can get young kids engaging with wildlife at a very early age, that will inspire them to love nature for the rest of their lives. And that has to be good, because these are the future decision makers. These are the future politicians. These are the future teachers, industry leaders. They're the influencers of the future. And therefore, if they're engaged at a young age, then the future is really bright. Excuse me. So the vision is for a scalable and sustainable model. And there's a lot of research that's going on at the minute with Essex University about the connection with nature. And this is something that you'll hear about later with the Tendering Loves Conservation project. And we're continuing to work with Essex University in relation to the nature nursery so that we can start to prove what we imagine is happening. And the stories, I have to say, so far have been just amazing from the parents. There was just one recently of a mother, and she's had some problems with her child who's about 4 years old, and she said for the first time ever they had an amazing weekend because the child was just so calm, relaxed, happy after just a few days of being at the nature nursery. Literally, the parent was in tears. She just couldn't believe that she could have such a wonderful weekend with her family because her child was a different child within 1 week of being at the nature nursery. So it's just a wonderful thing that we're doing. And I'm really excited about the prospect of going forward with this. Another big project which we've just launched is the opening of our brand new Nature Discovery Centre at Langdon. And to give you an idea of how long these projects take to deliver. So I first had a conversation about this back in January of 2016 regarding this. So I was stood on top of a landfill site, might seem a bit weird, but I was talking to the chairman of Veolia Maintenance Trust, which is an organisation which administers landfill community tax, which is the tax associated with landfill sites. And they've been the principal funder. And we started to talk about this vision whilst looking over this massive landfill site with rubbish as far as you could see, about how I wanted to redevelop the Langdon site. The existing centre was a little dated, if I'm honest. It was looking a little tired. It wasn't one of our best. So we managed to get this funding, which was postcode specific funding. So if you're thinking, well, it looks great, Andrew, but we could have done with it here, or why didn't we do this, or why didn't we do that? This funding was very specific for this postcode. So there was only a limited amount of things that we could do with it. And that's why this was a great opportunity for Langdon. It was also time limited. So there was a lot of pressure on us to really spend that money quite quickly. The building is based on the original footings, so we didn't have to put any new foundations in of any degree. So that was really good from a sustainability point of view. And the design of this building is very sympathetic to the local Plotlands history. It's an inspiring and I think stunning addition to the suite of centres across the site. And we had a lot of problems, as you can well imagine. We had problems most recently with COVID, with Brexit, dare I mention the B word again, but also with the Suez Canal. Some of the stuff that we needed to build this was stuck in the Suez Canal. So there have been a number of issues that we've had to cope with. But we've incorporated a new retail strategy, a new food and beverage strategy, so that we can model ethical and responsible catering and retail. And we've got new signage and new interpretation and new walking trails. So it's been a really fantastic thing to do. But, and I love this one, we're also claiming to have the most wildlife friendly car park in the UK. Now, you may not think that looks particularly special. It just looks like a car park, but it's a lot more special than that. It's been built by local people, designed by local people with local materials. We have these gabions, these metal wire cubes with local rubble and spiders, bees, lizards, all sorts of invertebrates as well can make home in these gabions. We've got some of the parking bays. You can just see a parking bay in the middle, which is surrounded by some orange, and that's actually filled with sand from the A13. That's home for solitary bees and lots of native flowers. We have dead wood piles that are associated around the edge of the car park. We have flower planting for pollinators, local species all around the edges. So this site is absolutely going to be bustling with wildlife. It's already bustling with cars, but it will be absolutely bustling with wildlife because it's stacked with areas that are specific for wildlife. And I'm so proud of it. And it's a special thanks to the amazing John Little, who terms himself a brownfield gardener, which I think is a fantastic title. I'm very jealous of that title, but he's been instrumental in helping us develop this site for wildlife so that it's you could spend easily half an hour in the car park when it's really bedded down looking for wildlife. So you wouldn't even have to go in the centre. You can get your cup of tea and come back out and go and wildlife watch in the car park if you want. But it's an amazing site, so please do go and have a look at it. Finally, from me, before I hand over to my colleagues, I just want to talk to you about having some defining moments in terms of our key species. So we have been looking at those key species. So we've been developing a list of key species, And unsurprisingly, there's a long list of key species that we've had to look at. And it's really your chance now to vote for what you think are your key species and what your favorite species are. So I'd like to introduce those. So the first one is the hedgehog. So the hedgehog is the nation's favorite mammal. I think it's been favorite mammal on 2, if not 3 occasions. We love hedgehogs. You know, I'm sure you know why you love a hedgehog. Not least because of getting rid of all the slugs in your garden from your vegetables, or just because they, you know, they look pretty. Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, I don't know what it is, but, you know, we all love hedgehogs, but their numbers have plummeted. So they've gone from 35 million hedgehogs to probably less than 1 million hedgehogs. So it's that serious. You know, people were saying number for number, they're probably more threatened than tigers if you look proportionally at the population decline over a number of years. So they're really, really threatened. A 30% decline in urban areas, a 50% decline in those rural areas in the last 20 years alone. What's causing that decline? So we've had habitat loss and fragmentation. We've had an increase in pesticides. We've had road deaths. We've had garden injuries, and also we've had competition from other species, sometimes such as badgers. But you can help. There are ways of supporting hedgehogs. You can build hedgehog houses, as I'm sure some of you have. You can put holes in your fences, which I know a lot of us have, and it's a very easy thing to do. Don't forget, your average hedgehog needs about 4 or 5 back gardens of an evening to go around. So just because you have hedgehogs in your garden, don't think that's enough. They need 4 or 5 gardens. Native flowers is a good thing. No slug pellets. We don't want slug pellets. They love the slugs, so let them eat the slugs. Poor old slugs, you know, we shouldn't be saying that, should we? As a wildlife trust, we should be supporting all creatures, but, you know, nature is nature, and there are food webs, there are food chains, and hedgehogs love slugs. Creating scrubby areas or messy areas, spits, and as I said before, log piles are fantastic. The next one, when I was a boy, house sparrows were a common species. They were considered ubiquitous, but they've been declining since the 70s, probably declined by over 70% in that time. They're now a red listed species. So they're a species of high concern. Increased urbanization, changes in agricultural practice, lack of nesting places, reduction of insects, increase in predators. All of these things have affected these sparrows, but we can help. Again, we can place put places for nests. We can put food out, particularly grain, bird baths, native flowers for insects, and avoiding pesticides. Again, those pesticides are bad. But another thing, pollinators, that's our third thing. So if you think about bees, flies, wasps, beetles, butterflies, moths, all of these things, there's been a very well documented decline, not just in Essex, right the way across Europe. And this is a major concern because of the services that they provide, the pollination services, or even the nutrient cycling services. But these ecological food webs, they rely on these insects. Things like the stability and the functionality of these ecosystems. These insects are so important. So we've lost half of our bumblebee species. Sorry, there's been a decline in half of our bumblebee species, but we have lost 3 species already of bumblebees. 2/3 of our moths have declined. 70% of our butterflies have declined. And I know this sounds very, you know, oh my God, Andrew, this is awful. It is awful, but there are things that we can do. But the reasons, again, why is this happening? Climate change, intensive farming, pesticides, loss of wildflowers, urban growth, loss of post-industrial brownfield sites. So all of these things, but by planting pollinator-friendly plants in your back garden and thinking about the entire life cycle. So don't forget about caterpillar food plants and these kind of things, places where they can hibernate. By thinking about these things, we can actually help these pollinator species. So now we're going to have a little bit of fun. Let's launch a poll now. So we're going to vote for our favorite key species. Vote for the species that you would like to see Essex Wildlife Trust focusing on in 2020. So you can use your voting button on your screen and you can click on the one, either the hedgehog, the house sparrow, or the pollinators that you would like to see the trust focusing on next year. So it'll stay up there a couple of secs and you can vote. So that's interesting. So 57% would like us to work more on pollinators, 27% on hedgehogs, and 16% on house sparrows. So that's really interesting. There's a broad spread there. There's a dominance there, definitely, for pollinators. So that's really good. So thank you for voting. I realize that this is only a small proportion of the membership, but it's really interesting. It's a really interesting outcome. And we'll certainly look at these results as we prioritize what we talk about next year. So I'm glad we did that. That was really interesting. Now I am going to hand over to Rich Yates, who's our Director of Engagement, and he's going to look at the future of Abbots Hall Farm.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks to all of you for joining us this morning for the annual Members' Day. We cannot emphasise enough, all of this good stuff would not happen without you. So our sort of heartfelt thanks. I'm going to give you a very potted history of Abbots Hall Farm, and then I'm going to give you a very brief outline of what we plan to do with the sites over the next 10 years and more. So this will be very brief, very much a bird's eye view, but then you'll be hearing a lot more about this from next year onwards. So Abbots Hall Farm was purchased by Essex Wildlife Trust in 2000, thanks to the legacy of an amazing woman, Joan Elliott, a Braintree girl like myself, and not a girl, a Braintree boy. At this point in 2000, it became the Trust's head office, relocating from Finger in Hoe Wick. The site was set up as a model for wildlife-friendly farming and sustainable farming. And a lot of our flagship projects over the years have happened here at Abbots, which is where I am today in one of the more salubrious offices. The seawall was breached in 2002 to realign the coast, which was a nationally significant piece of conservation, very innovative and pioneering, even now. Areas of the sites that were not being farmed were transformed into a nature reserve. So we've already got 2 decades of conservation under our belts at Abbots Hall. Also became the home of our forest school programs covering both children and adults. However, received wisdom is that you need about 1,000 acres of land for arable farming to be cost effective. So in 2020, we ceased commercial farming, which was a very difficult decision, but there was not the acreage for farming to represent the best use of the land for conservation. So since 2020, obviously COVID struck, and we've been limited in what we could do with the land. But we've still been very active on the land, using it for conservation grazing, doing surveys to monitor the ecology, studying the salt marsh. And you'll hear from Rachel Langley very shortly, a bit more detail about that, and seeding the fields with wildflowers for bird cover. And the abundance, I've been coming here every day throughout the entire period of the various lockdowns because my Wi-Fi at home is so bad. And the abundance of wildlife on site has already, with minimal effort, increased quite significantly. We've also, as Andrew's covered already, we launched the Nature Nursery here to add to our portfolio of forest school style activities. So there's been lots of stuff happening at Abbots in spite of COVID. So the question is, what do we do with the site now that we are free from the obligations of farming? Well, we started off with what we believe, which is fair and equal access to nature. And in fact, we would go as far as to say that access to nature is a universal right. And the benefits of access to nature are felt by both people and planet. We know that we as people benefit from improved health and well-being, which is the theme, part of the theme for today's annual Members' Day. But wildlife also benefits from the pro-nature behaviours that are associated with time spent outdoors and increased nature connectedness. The more time that people spend in nature, the more they develop a conservation mindset and become stewards of the natural world. If we're going to play our part in saving the planet by saving Essex and realising this vision of a wilder Essex, we need everybody on board. Therefore, access to nature is a practical necessity as well as a moral imperative. Our 10-year objective, which Andrew has mentioned, is to have 1 in 4 people taking action for nature by 2030. This is based on social science research. So 1 in 4 is the tipping point at which society generally accepts a minority view or opinion as a new norm, and then it enters the mainstream. So if 25% of people are showing pro-nature behaviours, the rest in theory should follow. But we can't achieve 1 in 4, and we cannot achieve a wilder Essex without levelling the playing field on access to nature. So our vision for Abbots Hall is to make it the most inclusive wildlife experience in the UK, prioritising people who, for whatever reason, have limited access to nature. This could be physical health, it could be mental health, cultural barriers, age, geography, anything that's relevant, anything that's a barrier. For this reason, it's likely that we'll open the site to the general public for some of the week, and we'll reserve it for special groups for other parts of the week. Why do this at Abbots Hall, I hear you ask? So Abbots Hall is a very unique place. It's a rare combination of being accessible enough to visit, but inaccessible enough to still be a genuine coastal wilderness. Owing to its previous incarnation as a farm, Abbots Hall also has an established access infrastructure, which is quite unusual for nature reserves. And this includes a circular spine road, which allows vehicle access to most areas of the site. There's also numerous farm buildings that can be repurposed. And although it may not seem so, Abbots is actually very well placed, not just for Essex residents, but it's positioned to serve a large number of counties within a 90-minute trip, which obviously includes London. So 16 million people live within an hour and a half of Abbots. And these are some of the people that we'd really like to bring to this coastal wilderness. However, because the site cannot be accessed without a car, and there's very poor public transport links in this part of the county, we will need to have a sustainable transport solution. So this will be a really key part of the project, to work out how we get people to the site. And another really key thing is going to be inclusive design as well. We want everything at Abbots to be designed so that it can be experienced by everyone. We need to achieve this through cutting-edge accessibility infrastructure. So this might include aerial towers, viewing platforms, habitat simulations, basically what we call enabling infrastructure. So things that can get you really close to wildlife, but also immersion techniques as well. And we're hoping that Abbots Hall will be the pioneer of what we are calling in loco experiences. So for anyone who knows their Latin, these will be point of view, habitat-based experiences where visitors see the world through the eyes of wildlife. So for example, to experience the world as a bird, you may need elevation. To experience it as a mammal, you may need to be at ground level or underground. And to understand marine life, you may need to be on the water, in the water, or underwater. So these experiences will be based on these different points of elevation, as well as the 4 seasons and the different phases of the day. So we'll be covering diurnal, crepuscular, nocturnal experiences, and so on. Of course, the site will still be a flagship reserve in its own right. A site with great access that lacks inspiration is not going to offer a great experience to those who really need it. So the intention is that every aspect of the site is our most ambitious yet, which for those of you who've been to Langdon, which Andrew's talked about just a short while ago, this is a strong statement. This includes the wildlife, the habitats, and the spectacles, as well as the facilities and amenities. So we're going to move away from the current chessboard topography of traditional field boundaries and establish a more sweeping natural landscape. And because the site will be a celebration of human diversity, the ecological theme will focus on biodiversity. And there's a relationship and a synergy between the two. So in the same way that biodiversity improves the resilience and productivity of ecosystems, research shows that human diversity improves the resilience and productivity of societies, which is sometimes called the diversity dividend. So finally, why are we well placed to do this? Because, you know, we're a county-based charity. Well, we have a tradition of being the first at Essex Wildlife Trust and leading large-scale transformation projects, such as Thameside Nature Park, which essentially converted a rubbish tip into a nature reserve. And that's just one example. We've got more visitor centres than any other trust. We're very experienced at visitor engagement, and our expertise spans all forms of public engagement. Our outdoor learning team is the largest county-based provider of outdoor education in Essex, and potentially the largest in the UK operating at a county level. And we have excellent relationships with funders and other environmental NGOs. And we run the largest corporate membership scheme in the Wildlife Trust movement. These are all things that as members, you know, I hope you're as proud of as we are. So what happens next? So now that the basic premise, the early vision has been approved by the Board of Trustees, we'll be drawing up more concrete plans and bringing together a project team. And then it will be full steam ahead. So keep your eyes and ears open for more in 2022. I'm now going to pass over to Emily to tell us about Wildlife TV. But first, I'm going to introduce Darren and Rachel, who are going to tell us about some of the work we have been doing, made possible through your generous support, to protect our rivers and seas. Darren and Rachel.
I'm Rachel Langley, the Living Seas Coordinator at Essex Wildlife Trust.
And I'm Darren Tansley, the River Catchment Coordinator.
And we're standing at one of the seawalls at Abbots Hall Farm Nature Reserve in the beautiful Blackwater Estuary, the place where living seas meets living rivers.
We're going to talk to you today about a couple of projects that we've got going on in Essex. They're going to reconnect the coast with our rivers and bring a wilder Essex to both people and wildlife across the county.
I'm going to be focusing on our salt marsh restoration project. Salt marshes are an iconic part of our coastline and a key in fighting the climate crisis.
And I'm looking at the problems that fish have migrating from the coast here up our rivers, past barriers that are almost impassable for all sorts of creatures. So let's have a look at those projects.
Yeah, let's get on. I'll head this way and see you in a bit.
I'm going off to the river. See you later. Our rivers are wonderful places for wildlife and for people, and this is an idyllic scene on the Essex-Suffolk border. But look closer and you'll see there's actually trouble at mill. This barrier stands about 3 metres high, and the water behind it is backed up and then drops to the level of the mill pond beyond. There is absolutely no way fish can get past this barrier. Imagine having the road blocked off to your house and being told there's not going to be a diversion anymore, you just simply won't be able to go there. This is exactly what fish face on a daily basis trying to make their way up our rivers. So what can we do to help them? On International Rivers Day, we're celebrating the start of the Essex Fish Migration Roadmap, a 10-year project designed to reconnect our rivers and allow fish to move back to their spawning grounds. So the great thing about these sorts of fish passes is that they're very natural. They follow the old route of the original river. They allow fish to pass upstream through a series of very shallow embankments to get to the same level of water that would be behind that massive weir. And it's only about, less than a third of a mile upstream where this channel joins with the main river. These are fantastic ways to get fish from source to sea and back again. So today we're celebrating the fact that we can actually do something about this. In 10 years' time, who knows what our rivers will look like, but they'll certainly be a lot friendlier for the fish that call them home.
Salt marshes are amazing habitats that do so much for us. In Essex, we have 350 miles of coastline, and salt marshes are an iconic part of it. Salt marshes do so much for us. They support an amazing biodiversity, including our amazing bird species, and they also act as a fish nursery area. They protect us from sea level rise and storm surges and help protect our coastal communities. They are also a nature-based solution to the climate crisis, as they sequester and store carbon. On average, salt marshes can store 2 tonnes of carbon a year and lock it into the sediment for centuries. This makes salt marshes a key blue carbon habitat. Salt marshes face a number of threats, including sea level rise, pressures from developments and eutrophication. In the UK, we have lost around 85% of our salt marshes and are losing them at a rate of 100 hectares per year. They need our protection and they need to be restored. The Salt Marsh Restoration Project started in 2018 and was initially a collaboration between Essex Wildlife Trust and the Environment Agency. The concept and the application is simple enough. It's installing coir roll structures in selected salt marsh creeks, and we're doing this to try and restore the salt marsh and also act as a defence for the sea walls. We secure the coir roll structures in these creeks with chestnut stakes and Hessian rope, and we're hoping that this will encourage sediment to accrete and also encourage vegetation to establish. So far, we've been doing some basic fixed point photography and visual observations, and the structures do seem to be doing this, which is great news. This year, we're in phase 3 of the project, where we want to establish some success criteria and really quantify how successful these structures are. It's really important we collect this data, as our ultimate aspiration is to scale up this restoration technique on a landscape scale.
I'm Nicola Shearer, I'm the Catchment Coordinator for the Environment Agency, and I cover the whole of Essex. Following the installation of the salt marsh structures, we're going to be continuing to work with Essex Wildlife Trust and the University of Essex to monitor how well these are being established, how well the vegetation is growing on them, and whether or not the salt marsh is regenerating. And we'll do this in a number of different ways. We'll take drone footage, LiDAR footage to see whether the ground level is increasing, whether the sediment is accreting behind the structures, and we'll also look at the vegetation types on the structure to see how well they are establishing. The Environment Agency is really proud to have been able to work with this partnership project with the Wildlife Trust, and now also to include the University of Essex, and we hope that we can do further projects like this in the future.
A key part of the data collection this year is a collaboration between the University of Essex, and today we are here on a field course where University of Essex students are helping us to collect some key data.
I'm Dr. Natalie Hicks. I'm a lecturer at the University of Essex, and today we've brought some of our undergraduate students who study marine biology and biological sciences to one of our salt marsh locations. So they're taking part in, as part of their field course, understanding the role of the salt marsh and looking at the restoration efforts we've been putting in place here. So the Essex coastline is particularly important in terms of its salt marshes. Many of them are being degraded over time, and we know that they play a really important role not only for coastal defence and biodiversity, but in mitigating against climate change. So today is the first day we've brought them out to have a look at collecting some of the data around the structures that we've put in place.
Partnership working between Essex Wildlife Trust, the Environment Agency and the University of Essex is really key.
And phase 3 of this project this year has been generously supported by the players of People's Postcode Lottery.
Some of the key data that we're collecting is looking at the carbon content of the accreted sediment, looking at the vegetation establishment, and also undertaking some drone survey work over the summer. The drone footage will help us take a wider scale assessment of the impacts of the structures on the salt marsh. We will bring all this data together in a project report and also put together a version 1 of a toolkit so us and other practitioners could look to expand this approach in their area.
Hi everyone. Today I am going to be talking to you about Wildlife TV, which is a digital campaign we ran last year. But to start the story, I will need to take you back in time. We'll need to travel back in time to the week of the 16th of March 2020, which is one I'm sure we will all remember. So the announcement of an upcoming national lockdown changed everyone's lives suddenly. Here at the Trust, we sadly had to close all of our nature discovery centres and change the way we all worked very quickly. So with most people in the country about to be stuck at home from the following week, from the 23rd of March under lockdown, With many people's routines ruined and a fear of being unable to get outside and enjoy our nature reserves and wild spaces, we knew we needed to move quickly and creatively to help connect our supporters with nature when they needed it most. So to do this, we came up with the concept of creating a TV schedule, our very own Essex Wildlife Trust TV schedule, full of local wildlife and nature content for our supporters. And the idea of Wildlife TV was born. So our aim of it was to bring wildlife, nature, the Trust's expertise and enthusiasm straight to people stuck at home, and to give them the ideas and tools to not only keep them entertained under lockdown, but to take action for nature starting at their home. So the reason we chose to follow a TV schedule format was that it would be familiar, and we wanted to give people that element of structure into their day during a very uncertain time when suddenly no one had a schedule and a structure. So we planned out 6 episodes a day of pre-recorded videos to be released at that scheduled time on social media. And there was also a slot a day linking people to our wildlife webcams on our website. We categorized the videos into 5 different areas, focusing on well-being, outdoor learning, wildlife gardening, and our 4 live wildlife webcams. So that was a varied mix of content that would engage more supporters. And we also shared all of the videos on our YouTube channel to send to our members through our weekly email communications through that wild news email that you receive, and for members of the public to access who may not use social media platforms. So we launched Wildlife TV officially on Monday, the 30th of March. We were quick off the bat, and the press release and our first TV schedule was picked up by all local press in the county, ITV Online, and it generated several radio interviews. So our first TV schedule post reached over 160,400 people. I think if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see what our TV schedule looks like. So it reached that on Facebook alone, and we knew we were onto something and that it was what people wanted and needed at that time. So each week we produced a new TV schedule, just like the one you can see, full of varied content led by different people throughout the Trust. And we advertised this on our website and social media so that people could keep a note of which videos they wanted to tune into and that there was something for everyone. So a handful of the Trust staff were already trained and used to being digital spokespeople for the Trust, but we wanted to encourage as many different staff members to get involved so that we could showcase the breadth of our knowledge, the enthusiasm and variation of who is behind Essex Wildlife Trust. So Wildlife TV did help us collectively internally bring us together in those initial scary times when all of our day-to-day routines were changed rapidly. It focused our minds and there was a collective ownership and involvement from all corners of the Trust. We came together brilliantly in times of adversity, and the campaign helped upskill and increase confidence in staff throughout the Trust, with people coming together from conservation to education, communications to fundraising, people's sports to centre staff, and as Andrew mentioned earlier, he was out filming his bird bath. So we had a lot of different videos from a lot of different people, which helped us to reach more people. So many staff members were also suddenly having to home educate their children, so they recruited some of their kids to join in with the fun, and this led to several children now seen as class celebrities, as their videos were all shared with their local schools to help engage them. And yeah, we've got the next Michaela Strachan probably with children from our staff members. So there was a few more celebrities from it in 2022 in the wildlife form. Our live wildlife webcams, which consists of a roost of hundreds of soprano pipistrelle bats that live in the roof of our Hanningfield Nature Discovery Centre, a family of badgers that live at Fingering Howick Nature Discovery Park, a pair of barn owls at Blue House Farm, and a pair of barn swallows that also come to Fingering Howick every year, were watched by thousands of people every single day last year. They featured on news stories throughout the world and on BBC One's national news for 3 weekends in a row, just because of how successful they were in connecting people to nature straight at home. It was nature's version of watching your very own soap opera every day, and it was comforting for people during that time. We also integrated Wildlife TV with our annual 30 Days Wild campaign during June, which saw the highest number of participants take part ever, which is fantastic, as research from that campaign shows that participants feel happier, healthier, and more connected to nature at the end of the month after getting a daily dose of nature for every single day in June. We also used the learnings from Wildlife TV for our first ever virtual fundraising event, the Essex Coastal Challenge, which was last August, which raised over £14,000 last year thanks to our generous supporters. And our outdoor learning team used the videos created during Wildlife TV to assist in launching a new outdoor learning consultancy, Inside Out. But one of the most important highlights of Wildlife TV was that it did help us to reach new supporters who had become interested in wildlife and nature and began to follow Essex Wildlife Trust to learn more about their local conservation charity. So we gained over 6,500 followers over the 3.5 months the campaign ran, and our videos received over 350,000 views. These new followers are now people who are learning all about conservation in their local county and hopefully taking further actions that will help wildlife where they live. I also wanted to share this great picture of a video we were sent by this boy's mum because he'd been inspired to do his own Wildlife TV video. So in the video, he ordered his parents or cameramen and women around the garden, and he gave viewers a seasonal safari, identifying what habitats and species he could find. So you never know, we might have just inspired a future Springwatch presenter as well. The aim of Wildlife TV, as I said, was to engage and connect people with nature during lockdown. So we decided by the start of July last year, when lockdown restrictions were easing and people were able to get out and explore a bit more again, that we would bring it to close in its current form because it had done its job. We finished Wildlife TV after 14 weeks, having created 225 videos by 38 members of staff and Billy the Badger, which you might be familiar with, and having generated over 19.6 hours of content that we can continue to use to showcase the trust and how people can engage with nature and help wildlife at home throughout spring and summer months. We created a specific playlist on our YouTube channel, and we regularly use these videos in our work in schools, at our centres, and across our social media channels. We were talking about the key species earlier. We have videos demonstrating how you can help all of these key species at home, at your local green spaces, and how you can work together so that we can bring the numbers back. So I know today alone, you've got a lot more exciting videos and presentations here to listen to. But if you do want to see a bit more, if you are hooked by Essex Wildlife Trust content, you can visit our YouTube channel after the AGM and look for the playlist Wildlife TV to watch them all again. But one warning, they are a bit addictive. They are very fun. So as I said, there's almost 20 hours of footage. So please do pace yourself. So thank you for listening today. Stay safe and stay wild, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day. I'm now finished, so I'm going to be handing over to one of our project managers, John Story, who is talking about an inspirational funded project the Trust launched earlier this year called Tendring Loves Conservation.
Hello, my name is John Story, and I'm a project manager working on the Tendring Loves Conservation project, or to give it its easier title, TLC. TLC is a programme of community engagement and site improvements that will connect people in the Tendring area to nature and encourage pride in place. For those of you who do not know every corner of Essex, Tendring is a district located in the northeast corner of the county. This area was chosen because it's the most deprived district in Essex. In addition, nature reserves in the area are in desperate need of some TLC, having suffered from antisocial behaviour. The project aims to engage with a range of targeted groups of children, parents, schools and adults who are least likely to have access to nature and therefore have a developed sense of nature connectedness and care for their local natural environment. In addition to community engagement, we also want to make improvements to some sites that are adjacent to the most deprived areas in Tendring, require visitor experience improvements, and are great locations for outdoor learning activities. We intend to measure the impact of the project by asking participants to complete surveys at the start, middle and end of their engagement with us. The surveys are designed to measure the impacts on behaviour and attitudes towards nature, well-being and nature connectedness. The project is fully funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. It started in March this year and will run for 2 years, ending in March 2023. I'm going to talk mainly about the community engagement programme and highlight some of the challenges we have faced. The community engagement programme consists of a programme of established Essex Wildlife Trust educational activities. For families, we'll be running 96 Wild Babies sessions and 100 Nature Tots sessions. The most significant challenge we face is how to engage and attract families who do not normally engage in nature-based activities. At the very start, we considered what barriers might prevent our target families from attending outdoor activities. A lack of warm and appropriate outdoor clothing was one, so we decided to offer waterproofs and wellies to those who needed them. Transportation is another, particularly given the absence of public transport to many of our sites. To address this, we've made use of the Tendring Community Transport Service, who are a non-profit organisation offering low-cost minibus transportation. We also thought that many of our target groups may not be comfortable going to a nature reserve, having never been to one previously. So we decided to hold the first few sessions in an environment that people will be more comfortable with. What better than the beach? Once groups are settled and comfortable, the sessions move to nature reserves. Having considered the barriers, our next challenge was how to engage with our target audience. With COVID causing many community-based contact points to close down, we were limited to using social media to advertise sessions. There was no point sending out adverts that everybody could see. We needed a targeted campaign. We chose Facebook as the best tool and set up a campaign that targeted specific geographical areas in Tendring and people with specific areas of personal interest that indicated they may be young parents or grandparents. We chose not to use our typical advertising pictures, as these are great at attracting lovers of nature, but would not appeal to people who do not usually engage in nature-based activities. We also chose to avoid terms that would seem irrelevant to parents in these communities, such as nature reserve, instead using terms they would be more familiar with, such as playgroup or stay and play. On the slide are a couple of examples of the adverts that we sent out. The approach was extremely successful. We attracted surprisingly good levels of participants who have never previously visited one of our sites or previously engaged in nature-based activities. Sessions have been running since June, and there are some really encouraging signs that we are making an impact. The large number of people expressing how much they love the activities and saying how disappointed they will be when their sessions have finished. We're now discovering that our Facebook campaign is losing its effectiveness. So our next challenge is to move beyond social media. With the COVID situation improving, we recently started a poster campaign targeting locations such as leisure centres, nurseries and libraries. The schools will be offering children aged 5 to 11 established activities such as after-school nature clubs, greening school grounds and school visits to our sites. We will also provide forest school training for school teachers. The schools we have decided to approach have been selected based upon funding and deprivation data, such as the percentage of free meals students. We have managed to sign up 10 schools, which is sufficient to cover all the school-based activities planned for the entire project. Finally, for adults, we will be running a series of work parties starting towards the end of October. These parties will work on improvements to our sites. We have started a targeted Facebook campaign and poster-based campaign to advertise work parties. We've had a good response, but have not inspired as many people as we would like. So we still need to do more and try different ideas. Moving away from community engagement, I'll briefly explain the site improvements. We currently have work taking place at 2 of our sites. Great Holland Pits Nature Reserve is located in the south of the district near Jaywick and Clacton. We've completed much needed improvements to the pathways and will soon be introducing a couple of themed nature trails. We've completed improvements to ponds, including the addition of a new dipping platform. We've created a new vertical bank for invertebrates, and finally, we'll be improving the signage and interpretation at the site. Rabness Nature Reserve is located in the north of the district near Harwich and Dovercourt. We will shortly start improving the pathways, aiming to make large sections Disability Discrimination Act compliant. We intend to introduce a themed nature trail that will run along the DDA compliant path. Finally, we will also be improving the signage and interpretation at the site. Thank you for listening. The TLC project has shown you some of the brilliant education and engagement work that the Trust does. I hope you enjoy the remainder of your day.
Thank you, John. That was fantastic. Tendering Loves Conservation is such a fantastic project. It's really helping us to reach so many people who may never have been on a nature reserve. And that's obviously so important. If we're trying to get 1 in 4 people in Essex connected to nature and stepping up for wildlife, then we need to access those communities who maybe wouldn't access them in the way that we might do at a nature reserve. So really, really great project, really exciting. So now I'm going to hand over to Zoe Ringwood, who's our area manager in the southwest of the county in landscape conservation, and she is going to be telling us about some amazing work that is happening to help insects in Essex.
Hello, I'm Zoe Ringwood, the Landscape Conservation Area Manager for South West Essex. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the National Action for Insects campaign and some of the work we've been doing in Essex this year. So why do we have a campaign focused entirely on insects? Well, insects truly are the most important creatures on the planet. They are a fundamental part of all ecosystems, acting as pollinators, prey, predators, parasites, and recyclers. Worryingly, insect numbers have experienced a big decline over recent decades, and globally, 41% of insects are threatened with extinction, which is a shocking statistic. This decline has a knock-on impact to birds, bats, mammals, reptiles, and in fact, all wildlife, and humans too. Therefore, we as conservationists need to take action and do what we can to help insects recover. And thankfully, it's not too late, and insects populations will recover if we give them help and space. A report has been produced by Professor Dave Goulson as part of the National Action for Insects campaign entitled Insect Declines and Why They Matter. And there's many facts and figures related to the decline of insects quoted in this report, and they do make for worrying reading. Let's just read a few here. 46% of wider countryside butterflies and 77% of habitat specialist butterflies have declined between 1976 and 2017. And then demonstrating the knock-on impact this has to other species, here's some statistics on birds. Between 1967 and 2016, UK populations of the spotted flycatcher fell by 93%, the grey partridge by 92%, nightingale by 93%, and the cuckoo by 77%. So why are insects showing such a dramatic decline? Well, this is due to a combination of factors, including loss and fragmentation of habitat, use of insecticides, unsympathetic habitat management, intensive agriculture, general loss of wildflowers across the landscape, and of course, climate change. So Action for Insects in Essex, I'm going to just tell you a bit now about some of the work we've been doing to help insects this year. And we're going to focus on a few examples. So I'm going to talk about the habitat creation at Two Tree Island to create bee banks. Also, some of the monitoring work and specifically gathering data as part of the Bugs Matter app. And also habitat connectivity across the landscape through the Big Wild Seed Sow, which aimed at providing patches of flowers for insects across the greater Essex landscape. I'm going to start by sharing a video. This video was by Tiff Rogerson, and it's talking about the work at Two Tree Island to create bee banks.
5th Conservation Area Assistant for the southeast of Essex, and today we're here at our Two Tree Island Nature Reserve creating important habitat for insects as part of our Actions for Insects campaign. Insects are crucial for ecosystems, but in the UK, insect populations are in decline, and we're trying to do everything we can to help them. Two Tree Island has a mosaic of habitats, including scrub, salt marsh and grassland, and it is an important habitat for Thames terrace invertebrates, which are one of the most important and threatened assemblages of invertebrates in Britain. These sandbanks we have created will provide nesting, burrowing and basking areas for a range of invertebrates.
That was great from Tiff. And just to say that they created the bee banks back in May this year, and within weeks there were holes all over the banks which have been created by mining bees. And other species recorded have been the blood bee, the painted nomad bee, as well as the yellow-legged mining bee. The banks have also been used by reptiles for basking. And it really shows that when you create the correct conditions, that the habitat will start being used almost immediately. So it really is a positive outcome for insects at Two Tree Island. Now, I'm just going to talk a bit about the Bugs Matter app. Firstly, have you ever noticed that you have so few insects squashed on the windscreen of your car nowadays? I certainly have, and this is a reflection of the declining insect numbers. And this year, we encourage supporters to sign up to the Bugs Matter app to help monitor insect populations across the county and to identify trends in the abundance of insects. So this monitoring, it works by firstly downloading the Bugs Matter app onto your phone. Then when you make a journey as part of your daily routine, before heading off, you clean your number plate, go on your journey as usual, and then when you stop, you then count the number of squashed insects within a grid that's provided that you place in the middle of your car registration plate. It's a citizen science survey, and we plan to repeat it in future years to help identify trends. And I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who took part. And we had just under 5,000 journeys logged this year across the 5 county trusts taking part. And I know for myself, I drove about 400 miles using this app. And I recorded just 7 insects squashed on my car registration plate, which just seemed so few insects. Now I'm going to talk a bit about the big wild seed sow. So as mentioned earlier, one of the reasons insects are in decline is the lack of wildflowers across the landscape. And the big wild seed sow aims to help address this. And we are asking our members and the general public to sow a native wildflower mix that is irresistible to insects in their garden, flower pot, workplace, school, college. It's a landscape scale campaign that everyone can be involved with. And we've been providing packets of wildflower seed free from our nature discovery centres this autumn, and asking people to sow the mix and then to add a flower pin to an interactive map to show the location on our website. And you can just see from this map, and this map was taken from our website about 2 weeks ago, so there've been more flowers added now, but it shows what a fantastic spread of wildflowers we now have across the Essex landscape. And this will really make a difference for insects and will provide stepping stones across the landscape for them to feed. And we'd like to say thank you to everyone who has taken part and sown the wildflower seeds. And there will be more opportunity to take part next year. Now going to have Bill, the ranger at Hanningfield. I'm talking to you about their big wild seed sow plot. And if you visited Hanningfield this year, over the summer, you would have seen the colourful display of wildflowers outside the centre there.
Hello, I'm Bill, the Essex Wildlife Trust Ranger at Hanningfield, and it's mid-July. We're going to look at the wildflower mix that we sowed earlier in the year. So if you come in a bit closer, you can start to see some of the species, and it's looking quite magnificent. So down here we have corn marigolds, corn chamomiles, the poppies striking out as much as ever, quite beautiful. The lovely blues of the cornflowers. And also further down, if you come down with us, you can see we have corn cockles as well. Absolutely magnificent mix.
That was great from Bill, and what a fantastic colourful display of cornfield annuals. And just to say, with the big wild seed sow mix, from year 2 onwards, the more hardy perennial species will start to flower. And I'm sure the mix will look even more magnificent next year. So Action for Insects, looking forward to 2022 and beyond. Well, we plan to continue with the big wild seed sow. And so there's an opportunity for more free seeds and to be involved in this campaign if you haven't been involved already, and to get even more wildflowers across the Essex landscape to help insects. And as part of citizen science monitoring, we're going to be running a pollinator monitoring scheme as well as a Bugsmatter app. And we're going to continue to enhance our reserves for insects and make them better than they already are. And also, we can achieve more when we work together. So we'll be seeking opportunities to influence and work in partnership to achieve greater gains for insects across Essex. Now, this is where we would like you to be involved. And we're asking for some audience participation. And we want you to think about a pledge you can make to help insects in Essex in 2022. If we all take a small action, we can collectively make a big difference. So now I'm going to present 3 pledge options, and then you'll be asked to make your pledge by voting for one of the 3 options. So first of all, I'm going to go through each option. So pledge 1 is take action and create habitat for insects. Now we need to think about the entire life cycle of insects when we think about what their habitat requirements are. So they need food, shelter, and a place to hibernate. And as part of this pledge, you could sow the big wild seed sow, wildflower mix. You could leave an area of your lawn, or indeed your entire lawn, unmown between May and September, creating your own wildflower meadow. You could build a bug hotel, or you could just welcome wildness and leave an area unmanaged and just completely dedicated for insects in your garden. Pledge 2 is to be an insect scientist and take part in surveys. Now, it's really important for us to get the evidence and to monitor trends in insect populations so we know that the actions we're taking are having the desired effect. So for this, you could take part in the Bugsmatter survey or the pollinator monitoring scheme next year. You could walk a butterfly transect, or you could simply record insects in your garden or in your local park and share that data. And pledge 3 is to spread the word and be an insect champion. Now, this could simply be sharing your love of insects with friends, family, and colleagues, and explaining why insects need our help and simple actions that can be taken. Or you could do something more formal, and you could contact your local MP and ask what they're doing to help insects and make suggestions of the changes you would like to see in your local area. So now it's time to vote and to make your pledge.
Thank you, Zoe. That's amazing. So great to hear about the variety of work that we've got going on at Essex Wildlife Trust, and great to hear from so many staff members as well. I always love that when we hear from the different areas of the trust. So it's also great from my perspective as well that Essex Wildlife Trust is part of this national campaign. It's wonderful that we can see how we can scale up the work that we do in Essex, and it's related to the whole of the UK. So that's wonderful. So we've got the pledge in front of us here. So use your voting buttons that you've got, and select one of the pledges that you personally might like to make for insects, and let's see how we compare with everyone else on the screen. So let's see how we get on. So taking action and creating habitats came out top. Some of you want to be scientists, and some of you want to be those insect champions and spread the word. But it seems like most of you want to create the habitats. But that's really interesting. That's again lovely to see. Really interesting to see how it compares. And whichever pledge that you're going to take, it doesn't matter. Whatever you do, you are going to make a personal difference to wildlife in Essex for sure. So great, really exciting. That really draws a close to the first part of proceedings this morning. So I hope you found it maybe inspiring, hopefully inspiring, enlightening, interesting, maybe even fascinating, finding out a little bit more about what we do at the Trust, the amazing projects that we do, and the support that you do as a member, the work that you are actually supporting. And it's personally a wonderful opportunity for me to look you in the face, or albeit remotely, electronically, but to say to you, thank you for your support. And without your support, all of the stuff that you've seen on the screen this morning in the last hour, it wouldn't be possible.